Hello darlings, and welcome back to the channel. First off, I want to say thank you to everyone who has helped, subscribed, engaged, and shared my last video. It was not an easy undertaking, and I had no way to know it would take off like it did. The encouragement and support I found from people who are just discovering my channel for the first time has been such a reprieve from everybody else discovering my channel through that video. Also, for the first time ever, I am possibly looking at making content creation my full-time job, something I honestly never thought would be remotely possible. So I want to sincerely thank everybody who has helped and donated to my channel. It has been truly invaluable, and there's no way I can ever hope to repay your generosity. However, as I've managed the comment section and continue to work on my next video, one question seemed to pop up over and over again. Did the church find out? Yeah, they found out. Pretty soon after the original video was uploaded, almost everyone unfriended my fake Facebook account and blocked me. And Pastor Aaron Thompson from Vancouver and Robert Larson, both of whom I mentioned in the video, decided to comment down below the video, and Robert has been coming back every couple of days to keep quoting scripture. And while the violent, unhinged rants of the entire church has led many to worry about my safety, I want to say I am safe and well protected. I might not look it, but I'm a strong proponent of the Second Amendment. However, because of the inherent paranoia of infiltrators they showed during my time there, I've been keeping a close eye on if they've mentioned me or preached about me at all. The thing is, the whole church body has been traveling lately, in preparation for their Red Hot Preaching Conference, an annual conference where all the biggest names gather for 3 days of good old Bible thumping fun? That doesn't seem like the right word for it. So as a result, there have been a lot of guest preachers and not much attention to little old me until the conference itself, where Pastor Aaron Thompson, the pastor of Sure Foundation Baptist Church in Vancouver, decided to call me out in his sermon to several hundred people in attendance. Well, they say several hundred, but I have no way to verify that. From certain shots like these ones, we can clearly see these aren't just paltry numbers assembled here. While we can't see any of the faces, we can also clearly see that there are many young audience members in attendance, something to keep in mind as you continue watching some of the stuff that they say here. I had previously debated if I would even make a response video. I doubt they'd see it, and a random one-off sermon would have not been worthy of my time. I mostly have been monitoring the church to keep tabs on any open threats they might make against me, and in case I need to take any legal action in the future. However, Pastor Thompson's sermon rankled me, because not only did he call me out, his sermon was primarily focused on denying the people who call the church out as liars. He inferred that the new IFB was often smeared as something they aren't, that they are unfairly maligned and not allowed to speak in their own terms. You know, like that time I made a video where they extensively talked in their own words. This kind of deflection is nothing new, but the way Aaron seemed to deflect while just leaving the door open for criticism felt really too easy to pass up on. So I had to jump back into the fray once more.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
Let it be known that I was cooking a great video on The Sound of Freedom, probably better known as the movie your grandparents keep telling you to watch. It's basically a lie. The entire movie is a lie meant to grift well-meaning evangelicals out of their money. That's still coming, by the way. I only bring it up because the movie actually does get mentioned later, because of course it does. Of course, all the same trigger warnings apply here as the last video. We get outright transphobia and homophobia. They quite literally pride themselves at points on using slurs, as we'll see. But there's also a lot of anti-Semitism. Like a lot. For the whole conference. Now, I don't want to go through every point Pastor Thompson brings up in his sermon, just a few, because otherwise we will be here all day. But to start, I would like to know how many of the preachers really feel like amateur comedians. Something that differentiates these conference preachers from the ones I saw at church were they all have a habit of starting their sermons with jokes, like they're trying to put together a tight five at the local comedy open mic. It's weird, but don't give up on your dreams, I guess.
Hey, if I could just get the ushers to just turn the air conditioning down just a little bit, I'd really appreciate that. Anyway, I also want to point this out real quick on the, I'm very excited to come to the youth conference. But look at this Photoshop here. I mean, it looks like Pastor Mez is almost as tall as me.
Thompson also welcomes travelers from his church to show who traveled to California to be at the conference. From the stream, we can clearly see Daniel Kutzar, who many may remember as the guy who made you want to turn my video off.
And if I could just have my two evangelists stand also at the same time. So Brother Jim Weeb here, he's our ordained evangelist in Winnipeg, Canada. Our friendly neighbors to the north. And then we have Brother Daniel Kutzar here, and he is the evangelist in Spokane, Washington.
But before getting right into the meat, Thompson wants to warn about harsh subject matter. See, these sermons are only available on Rumble. They're too hot for YouTube. I actually had to sign up to a website called bannedbutnotbound.com, where you get on an email list to see these kinds of hate speech filled videos when they drop, because they get delisted everywhere else. On that subject, Banned But Not Bound has an introductory video. Bruce Miejas praising of the deaths of the Orlando nightclub shooting victims. So that's the tone they're setting welcoming you in. And if you had any more reservations that this church ever had their heart in the right place, the notices on that website guide you first to spread the influence of the church and then give them that sweet, sweet cashish. Anyway, we got to get back to Thompson's new bits he's workshopping.
And you were pre-warned about language, yelling, screaming, hard preaching, and hard subject matter that not everyone can handle. So if you're upset and you're offended by the end of this sermon, well, then you just didn't listen to his sermon. So maybe you should go back and listen to it.
Aaron Thompson's sermon was called 3 Things to Beware of, citing Philippians 3, verse 1, and Paul's warning to the Philippians against dogs, evil workers, and concision. He also calls it a safety sermon, ironic considering how little his church seems to care for the safety of others.
This is a safety sermon. Paul was writing to the Philippians and saying, hey, there's some things that you need to be aware of. Look what it says in verse 2. Beware of dogs. Beware of evil workers. Beware of the concision. So,
now, if you're thinking dogs refers to literal dogs, Thompson disagrees. To him, it means reprobates, sodomites, me.
Dog, in a lot of scriptures in the Bible, is talking about sodomites. It's used as a synonym for sodomites. But it says the power of the dog. So, do dogs have power? According to this psalm, they do. Now, you're like, well, sodomites are sissies and all this and that. Yeah, but they're dangerous too.
We get plenty of warning that gay people, sodomites, reprobates, whatever they're going to call them, are dangerous. This is important. He goes on like this for several minutes.
You know, if you've been warned about hanging around with them or letting your children be babysat by them, or you have some cousin or Siamese twin or whatever it is that you have hanging around with you, don't hang around with them. Paul says, beware of dogs. Beware of them. Do not be around them.
Again, I don't want to get too deep into dissecting everything, but I want to show this clip where Thompson recounts a story about a woman who emailed him concerning the rhetoric of his church because she had previously dated a woman.
Church, but you know what? I'm glad they don't want to come back because they're like, well, I was in a relationship with a woman for, this is a woman. I was in a relationship for a woman for 4 years. And I'm like, well, hey, don't email me again. Don't come back to our church. You're not welcome. And I'm glad that freaks out of our church because I was thinking like, they said, well, hey, these people were so nice that welcomed me to your church. And I was like, well, why haven't you come back? And they're just like, oh, it just wasn't the right fit for me. But why are you emailing me telling me how nice our church people are? But they're like, well, there was this underlying tone. The guys look really angry. It's just like, guys just look like that all the time. Like, what are you talking?
Thompson's response to someone saying the men look unfriendly and angry is, that's what men look like. While the timing of the punchline tells me it's clearly meant to be a joke, it's also telling he seems to think it's a valid response, that subliminally he thinks the default setting of men is to make women uncomfortable? Maybe that's just my reading of it. But of course, what does the Bible say about reprobates?
The Bible says that they should be surely put to death, their blood should be upon them. Okay, what does that mean? Well, whatever instrument you use to put them to death as a capital punishment, then their blood is going to be upon them. And really, if you're spiritually speaking, when it says your blood shall be upon you, that you're paying for your own sins at that point. You're done. God, and obviously that's a figurative way of saying it, but if you put someone to death, there's blood on them, right? If you throw rocks at someone until they die, there's going to be blood upon them. If you put a bullet through their head, there's going to be blood on them, right? Or on, the wall or whatever. Depends on what kind of bullets you're using, right?
As he cracks wise about blood splatter, I want to go back real quick to the section where we can clearly see the audience in attendance. You weren't able to see it in my previous video, but there were little kids everywhere. This video was taken just before Thompson's sermon, by the way. This is the audience in attendance when he's preaching. Thompson continues to screed, and I'm not gonna give it much time because it's nothing I haven't heard before. I want to give one last brief aside to Thompson as he complains about his PayPal being deleted and cites higher powers. What could those higher powers be? It's the Jews.
How is this kind of stuff happening? Well, because behind the scenes, there's higher powers out there, right? There's higher powers that work for the devil. And so is there any reason why you would think that they're not going to, activate themselves against us? Because really, if you think about the three things that it mentions here, the dog, the evil worker, and the concision, which is a Jew.
Keep in mind the use of the word Jew here, because we're coming back to it later. Yeah, there's a reason I call them a Nazi church in the headline of this video if I don't have to change it for YouTube guidelines. But first, another brief comedic interlude.
You put on a man's garment as a lady, that you're an abomination. Why? Because you're trying to look like a dude. That's why. And vice versa. And it's so funny because I think it was Pastor Shelley was preaching this the other day. He's like, if I came in to this church with yoga pants on, you'd be pretty offended. You'd definitely be offended if you saw me in them. But
yes, the biblical garment of yoga pants. I forgot to mention it in my last video, but many people have pointed out the hypocrisy of using the Levitical laws to stand against homosexuality, but not other things like mixed garments. But this is just the first hump on the hate roller coaster, so hold on tight. I'm gonna bleep as much as I can because it's going hard and fast for these next parts.
Are freaks and an abomination to God. So why would you want to dress like a always dress up in these big floral outfits and dresses and skirts and all this stuff. Why? Because they want you to think that they are what they're really not. They pretend. Pastor was talking about that person that came in and infiltrated last night. We had someone that actually came into our church for 3 weeks, and it was a
Now, he mentions that another pastor talked about a person who came in and infiltrated last night. I didn't know if that meant there was an infiltrator last night or if the pastor talked about it last night. He doesn't give more specifics. So I watched every other sermon in the conference. I watched 6 other sermons, and no, I will not be going through them all because what I think he actually meant was referring to a gay person who other pastors mentioned was in the audience that night. The wording was just unclear to me. I will be digging into the sermons a little bit, but I'm not breaking them all apart because it's not really worth my time. But in the meantime, let's talk about me.
Now, but do you think that they dressed like a No, they didn't dress like a They took off all the fake makeup and dressed like a dude. The video I couldn't even stand to watch just because it dressed back up to do this reveal video, recorded our church members, and it's like, did you guys think that there was something weird about them though? Oh, yeah. See?
I'm sorry, I'm allergic to bullshit.
Remember just a little bit ago when Thompson was saying you shouldn't hang out with reprobates? Nobody should? How about the original video where I mentioned the church's website says homosexuals will not be allowed to attend? Yeah, after Aaron Thompson asks if anyone from the church knew something was off about me, we hear a confident yeah from the crowd, who I can only imagine is Daniel Kutsar. But if they thought I was a reprobate, they still invited me to their table. Still had me around for 3 weeks, ate and chatted with me, which I would think, according to Thompson's brimstone rhetoric, would be damn near heretical. So either they know, and by the standards of this hate church, ignored the word of God, or they didn't know and allowed a sodomite to infiltrate their midst. Which is it, Aaron?
They're scared. They're cowards. They come in and they're like, oh, we won this big victory or something. What victory did you win? That freak sat through some of the hardest preaching that they probably ever heard in their lives. And our church family, I think it made our church look good. Because even though they sussed them out a little bit, it was still they were still treating it like, hey, give it the benefit of the doubt.
Oh, okay. So this made your church look good?
Pray for more Muslims to go and shoot up these gay nightclubs. And whenever 50 of them die, yes, less pedophiles on this earth.
I assume because it's high school students, she is a minor. is in a see-through dress. And I can tell that her underwear was polka dot.
You didn't score some moral victory by coming in and infiltrating our church, and our church treated the person pretty good, despite the fact that they did suss them out. So these freaks will try to come in, and they'll try to blend in and things like that. But look, transvestites and trannies are sick and disgusting. They're freaks. And like, this is the battle that's raging on in our country right now. This is a fight that's happening that we're not winning, because we have a lot of things against us, but you know what? We're still going to win anyway, because God's going to destroy all these freaks anyway someday.
Wow, compelling stuff. We're not winning, but we're gonna. Just cuz. Now, that's pretty much it for little old me, for now at least. There's an upcoming anniversary sermon for the Spokane Church that Thompson will be preaching at, so I may get to hear something there. But from here, we get back to business as usual. Thompson starts railing against trans kids. As always, trigger warning.
In Washington, they just passed a bill about trans therapy, and they don't put an age limit on it. And it's for minors. You know what they're allowing to happen now? For children to make the decision to become another gender. And they're passing laws in order to make it really easy for people to do these things. Now, a minor can become some other gender, and you're like, well, that's hateful rhetoric, Pastor Thompson. That's not really happening. Why'd they make the law then? Why'd they pass the law then? That you can, as a minor, and if you're feeling, and I'll read you all the stuff here in just a minute, but as a minor, you can run away from home and you'll be protected, and your parents won't be told where you're at.
Here we have another mention of Washington's recent law that is meant to protect at-risk youth, the same kind of youth who get kicked out of their house for being gay or trans by families full of people just like this. I did a more thorough takedown of the same argument in my last video and cite the sources there too. Then Thompson goes from talking about protecting children to a movie about pedophiles to everybody's favorite social scapegoat.
First, they just wanted to be able to get married. Love is love. Then they just wanted the ability to adopt children. And now, here we are, where now they're trying to change little children into something that they're not. Why would they be doing that? Why? Because there's a faggot agenda out there to molest children. And that movie was talked about. I haven't seen that movie or whatever, but yeah, I agree. We should shine the light on all this pedophilia and stuff. And it should tell you something when everybody's downplaying that movie. It beat Indiana Jones. You know, Indiana Jones was a big movie back in the day. And it beat Indiana Jones outright on the opening night. Because you know what? People are waking up to this, and the pendulum is starting to swing into the other area. And it is because, you know, once they were allowed to just take the mask off, the things and the horror that they're putting people through is wicked and sick. And you know what? Again, the new IFB is preaching about this. Why are we so persecuted? Because we preach against these f***its and these reprobates, and we preach against Jews too.
I put this in because it's a great microcosm of how hate speech spreads and the very specific brain rot it brings. You start with something that a lot of people have concern for, like gender care for kids, an understandably touchy issue. But before you know it, you're going through the looking glass. That gets attached to a movie about South American sex trafficking, a movie that is entirely made of lies, by the way. Stick around for the next video. And before you know it, you've got Jews in the mix somehow. For the random person, this sounds like unhinged rambling. But to the hundreds in attendance, it all makes sense somehow. Their brains have been inculcated to see the secret symbols and connections behind all of it. We get a very clear reference to libs of TikTok's continued efforts to target queer people. Thanks, Chaya, you're in great company with the Nazi hate church.
They could be creeping on them, grooming on them. And even the teachers, I mean, you see these teachers making these weird TikTok videos like, oh, I told all the kids that, you know, that it's okay to be gay, and all, you know, they're making all these weird. You know what I'm talking about?
He bitches about drag queens, Pride Month. It's all the same stuff, repeated ad nauseum to drive these talking points deeper and deeper. But he says something that did catch my attention.
And look, it's not just the month of June, but now they have the month of October. Yeah, it's History Month then.
Actually, Aaron, it's because Halloween is for the gays. This next clip starts as something familiar, but then takes a very weird turn. In my last video, a lot of people took issue, rightfully so, with the preacher who ogled a young girl he thought was dressing inappropriately. On that note, I feel like what Thompson says here, whether intentionally or not, gives us a clear look into how he views sex and sexuality in a very similar way.
To change their gender identity, to change them, to cut and chop parts off and add or possibly add parts on, or give them hormone blockers, puberty blockers so that they don't go through puberty. Why do you think that they'd want to do that? Why wouldn't they want a child to go through that natural change in life? Well, maybe to keep, like little kids. So you know what they want to do? They want to perpetually make this person a child, to look like a child, to not grow. Look, men grow hair, and when you get older, you grow hair where you don't want it to grow. Okay? But when you don't go through that change, then it's, you don't grow that hair. And this is what perverts like. So they can be old and look like a little kid and feel like a little kid to them. This is the kind of stuff, this is the sick stuff that's going on in our government. And it needs to be called out.
Just really weird, dude. I've attended services like this in person, and it's still shocking to me that people willingly bring their small children and impressionable adolescent teenagers to this stuff. Now, I'm gonna fast forward a bit because the rest of this really isn't worth examining. Thompson goes off on a very gross joke about not understanding two-spirit people and how indigenous people were wiped out by God on purpose. Straight up Nazi rhetoric, by the way. In what I can only imagine is a call out to my video, which I basically started by debunking the whole litter boxes in schools myth, Thompson acknowledges that one of his talking points, the litter boxes, is debunked, but then basically says, it doesn't matter if it's not true because it's still happening anyway.
Now, look, I know that the cat box in the restroom, I think that was debunked or something. I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me, though. But people are like, you're teaching something that was debunked or whatever. I don't care. They're still identifying as cats in school. That's the bigger problem, isn't it? I mean, the litter box is a side issue. It's weird and gross. But if that's not happening, people are still identifying as animals in school.
Now, this next clip I'm going to show, and feel free to skip ahead several minutes because we get a graphic depiction of suicide and details about what happens to the human body when it descends into the ocean too quickly. I'm only really showing this to, again, show what small children are being taught and shown in this church, while these people scream about drag queens reading baby storybooks.
And people will say, well, it's the preaching like this that makes these trans kids want to kill themselves. Look, they probably want to kill themselves because they've gone to a point of no return. Homos have always wanted to kill themselves because they know what kind of vile, disgusting freaks they are. And so, some of them actually take what Jesus said to heart probably. And, put a millstone about their neck and were dropped to the depths of the sea. They found a way to off themselves so they don't offend more and get a hotter hell as a result. That's what Jesus recommended. You're like, where did Jesus ever say to kill yourself? Well, I mean, he just said it's better for you to put a millstone about your neck and be dropped to the depths of the sea. And you know what happens when you go deep into the ocean really fast? You explode. That's what happens. Or implode. I don't know. There's that whole Titanic thing. I don't want to talk about that, though.
Here we get a brief summation of the persecution they feel all the time.
And there's a lot of evil workers that come and try to attack our churches. They try to just pull any trick that they can. They try to smear our names through the mud and make up just blatant lies about us.
As I've shown in this video and my last one, I'm really just showing their church in their words. Their own hateful, sinful, stupid words. These aren't lies, Aaron. The only lies are the ones you tell yourself of how righteous you think your church is. But in all our hate for the transes, we forgot to talk about the real puppet masters of society. We start by talking about a TikTok video where apparently a woman saw kids at Jonathan Shelley's church doing a Hitler salute. I don't know what this video is, and honestly, it's a little hard to follow, but this section is a good springboard.
There's a TikTok video also about Pastor Shelley's church. So sorry, Pastor Shelley. And it's a so-called female journalist. And what she says in this video is, The kids lined up and all flipped the protesters off and did a Nazi salute afterwards. All the kids at Steadfast, after church, lined up, gave them the finger, and then, Heil Hitler!
Weird enough that this would draw such emphatic laughter from the crowd, but oh geez, I wonder why people would think you guys are Nazis.
I'm going to just start saying it's the Jewish media from now on because that's all it is. We don't have an American media. We don't have anybody that cares about America.
Anti-Semitic.
That's whatever you want to call me, I don't care. But
So let's talk about the Jews for a second. Judaism is an anti-Christ religion by definition. Is it any marvel that the most famous dealing with the Sound of Freedom film that's out there, clip of people denouncing it is on CNN? Shocker, CNN, and then there's some guy that's speaking against it, and his last name is Rothschild. Now, I didn't look up if he was a Jew.
But we had another guy come to our church, and he's just like, you guys preach so hard against the Jews, because he's actually ethnically a Jew. He's like, you guys preach so hard against the Jews. He's like, I was actually scared to go to your church. And when he said it to me, I said, you're a Jew? Come here, bro. Come here. He was just like, yeah. He's like, my dad was just like, they're on the ADL website. Because, they're Jews. He's like, they're on the ADL. This is a hate group. They're going to hurt you there. He's like, no, I think I'll be fine, But it was like a battle within him to come to our church because of that. Which, hey, I mean, amen. Good,
In case you were thinking I had to search high and low for those clips and cherry pick them, I didn't. Those are all from the conference. Just the first 2 days or so, not even the last half. Then we go into a weird tangent that I had to go and look up just what the hell he was talking about.
Because if billions of people are watching these TikTok videos, or millions of people are watching them, then all these people think that this is true. Here's what they also said. They said, on the sticker on the video, it says, another journalist was found dead in an alley. And it's just like, what are they? Oh, I know what they're talking about. They're talking about Todd Ferguson. Todd Ferguson, who's roasting in hell right now. And here's their lie that they like to tell about this. I've heard rumors that I killed Todd Ferguson. Brother Ben is apparently an assassin. Ben the Baptist. He came right from Israel, and he's a sleeper cell agent in the new IFB. You didn't know that Pastor Shelley paid him to murder this guy?
Here, Aaron Thompson is talking about Todd Ferguson, who was found dead in 2021, the victim of an apparent robbery. Todd had a long-standing public feud with Steven Anderson, the founder of the new IFB movement, from which Aaron Thompson's church hails. An in memoriam section from the website called The Reason Files details Todd's investigations into the church, talking about how people like Aaron would mention graphic ways he should die in their sermons. It also details a long-standing harassment campaign from the IFB, including an IFB member who would make fake YouTube channels branded after The Reason Files, but with gay pornographic videos, which the writer notes means that the person who did that had to have watched the gay pornographic videos. I recommend reading through the in memoriam, and I'll post it below. It details a long-winded campaign of death threats from the many members of the church to Todd, and an outpouring of hate speech publicly spewed following his death. Exactly the level of class and tact I'd expect from this group. But Aaron's getting a little winded, so let's start wrapping this up with...
But anyway, I got to move on to the Jews and be done here. I'm really past time. But why should we beware of Jews? Well, here, I'll just give you a good reason. They killed Jesus. There's a good reason to avoid them. And so, and look, they don't think we're the same as them. They think we're goyim or cattle. They use all their connections. They're the banksters of the world. They're the porn industry. They're the Hollywood movie industry. They are the music industry. So the Jews are always trying to use the to do their agenda. The Jews are using all different matters of things because their father, Jesus said, you're of your father, the devil. Right. And the works of him, those are the works that you do, right? They're the father, the devil. When they rejected Christ, their new father was the devil.
And see, here it wraps back around in on itself. A perfect conspiracy donut of who you should avoid. Gay people and Jews. I'd almost forgotten how exhausting these sermons are to go through. Not because of how hard it is to hear about my sins, but because every minute or so there's a point that is either an outright lie or exaggeration, or just a petty grievance masked to an audience as the Word of God. In watching the other sermons and podcasts from the conference, I was tempted to pick them all apart from each pastor's bizarre insistence on stand-up routines.
And I'm from West Virginia, and there's a lot of tropes about West Virginia. Okay, I have shoes. These are my real teeth.
To their continued and obvious efforts to appeal to the youth.
You want to hear Pastor Mejia preaching tonight. First off, Pastor Thompson. Second, Pastor Mejia. And we have hundreds of people already filling in. This is going to be off the chain. It's going to be lit. It's going to be bass. It's going to be Chad. It's going to be everything you could want.
Chad.
I've never seen so many trad wives in my life.
But there's no real point. They talked about a couple more things across the sermons, like finding a wife, trying harder to go out and proselytize, and the importance of tithing, which I didn't realize was such a big thing to this church. Like, they really seem to ostracize people who aren't giving 10% of their income. It's bonkers. And see, I'm tempted to go into that already. There's just so much of this at any given time, and there's always going to be more, because not only are they capitalizing on popular right-wing arguments like anti-trans rhetoric, but they're very purposefully indoctrinating children with their Nazi-ass bullshit. It's this feedback loop where they're always going to be in the zeitgeist with their finger on the pulse. But if my previous video showed me anything, it's that people do care. It's not a coincidence that my video on a hate church was the one blowing my channel up. Documentaries on forgotten games, not very mainstream. My videos on trans rights and wokeness, prescient, they got some slight traction, but the one that blew up, it was the one on the hate group. I've learned a lot from the comment section, as a few have assailed me with bigotry without even watching the video, or even more laughably tried to take an enlightened centrist worldview to the issue. I instead was more affected by the outpouring of honest stories that came from people who recognize this kind of rhetoric. People from all kinds of backgrounds, from Catholic to Methodist to more pure Baptists, reminisced about their upbringings, their similarities and differences between their churches and this one. People talked about friends or relatives they've lost to churches like this, or even told their own stories about getting caught in the thrall of churches like this. It's a reminder that this hate and bigotry is nothing new. Grifters like Steven Anderson, false prophets like Daniel Kutsar, and blowhard, overcompensating man-children like Aaron Thompson are not new. They're not fresh, they're not even original. This bigotry isn't new, and the power it gives these men over others isn't new. But what the modern world has the advantage of is knowledge and information, freely shared, that allows us to connect with one another and decide for ourselves what to believe. We get to determine how society progresses, and when something like this rears its head, we have a responsibility to speak out against it. I've had a lot of people call me brave or even a hero for my last video, and while I certainly appreciate the sentiment, I wholeheartedly disown those labels. Because while I admit I might have more impulsivity and maybe recklessness than the average person, the reason I made those videos isn't to be called stunning and brave. It's because I found out something like this was happening in my hometown and decided to do something about it. I took it upon myself to shine a light on this infestation that is festering in our society, rotting just out of sight. Another thing I've had people ask me in the comments is, how can I help? Allies in the comment section who want to support trans people or just the LGBTQ in general. This is how. Do your own research, make your own videos, spread awareness of what this rhetoric is and how much it's spreading. Because while this has affected me personally as a trans non-binary person, this isn't an issue just for people like me. The hatred they're spreading affects us all, and allowing it to continue flowing unabated will only result in more stories like that of Tyler Dinsmore. And at this point, I have no problem calling them Nazis. I call them like I see them. When you have an entire conference dedicated to the Word of God and nobody can seem to stop spreading the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about Jews controlling the world, and not only that, it's accepted and encouraged, along with the open anti-Indigenous sentiment and endorsing Manifest Destiny like Thompson did, yeah, Nazis. If anything, I was maybe a little too nice in my admittedly scathing last video. I let a lot of their words speak for themselves, exposing their flimsy ideology as the thin justification for bigotry it is. Each one of these preachers are just bullies who love a pulpit. They prance in front of cameras with their hack jokes that would get them crickets from any open mic, and yell and scream about people who are different to congregations who have been taught to fear anything as unfamiliar as their own shadow. They love the spotlight, preening like Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard for that last shred of relevancy that can give meaning to their miserable, hateful lives. Well, bitch, here's your close-up.